Queer theory is a complicated set of concepts with the complexity of meanings. At its core, queer theory is a way of inspecting society under a critical lens. It forces us to question the foundations of society and the ways in which power is created and maintained. Queer theory can be applied to virtually anything, but in the context of sexuality and gender, the two main applications we'll discuss in this video include deconstruction and performativity.
Before they are born, children's lives are already being shaped and controlled because of gender. Gender reveal parties, which have become very popular in Western culture, clearly illustrates the way in which the social construct of gender is continually being taught. If it's blue, it's a boy, and if it's pink, it's a girl. Gender reveals do not reveal gender. They only reveal the anatomy that the child will have at birth. Might as well have the balloon saying it's going to have a penis. Gender reveal parties do not take into account the child and how they will grow up and who they will decide to be. But of course, things are not that simple. Gender is constructed, but so is the sex of a person. Biology does not follow the binaries that have been constructed by society, as not everyone fits perfectly in what is considered female or perfectly male.
I have XY chromosomes, but typical female genitalia.
I'm a girl who has testes and XY chromosomes.
I identify as a queer, gender nonconforming intersex person.
I identify as a Black intersex man.
All of this calls into question the fixity of the gender binary and the sex binary. One of the fundamental aspects of queer theory is its focus on deconstruction, more specifically on the deconstruction of essentialist universal truths such as binaries. The gender binary is one that is seen in many parts and aspects in society. We are socialized to believe in the gender binary from the beginning of life when we are assigned either male or female at birth. It then persists through adulthood via gender roles and expectations. The gender binary is even reinforced by products that are marketed to a specific gender. Notice that there are no dresses in the boys section, and the girls section seldom has any superhero attire. From phrases on boy t-shirts claiming to be a hero and girls t-shirts labeling them as princesses, the ideas that men are dominant and action takers and women are more submissive and docile and obsessed with their looks are reinforced and taught to the younger generation from a young age. The gender binary is seen in many different places: bathrooms, schools, prisons, and even hospitals. It is this constant reproduction of the gender binary that creates a mentality of always being there and being what is natural. These ideas lead to transphobia and hate towards anyone that refuses to adhere to the binary and pushes people to question their ideas of gender. Queer theory's deconstruction of the binary and gender in general allows for new identities and new ways of expression and acceptance. It allows for new terms and identities, for freedom in just being. In queer theory, deconstruction is not limited to gender. It is possible to deconstruct any aspect of society. One of these is sexual orientation. Queer theorists deconstruct this concept by taking into account the newness of these terms and their definitions. Sexual orientations are a fairly recent development. They were first used in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Seeing sexualities as a binary leads to forms of bi-erasure and biphobia and creates hierarchies and inequalities even amongst the LGBT community. An important influence on the deconstruction of sexualities is the Kinsey scale. Alfred Kinsey was a sex-positive researcher whose research in the mid-20th century targeted the sex-negative culture of society during that time. He found that many men and women experienced same-sex attraction to some degree. The scale ranges from 0, exclusively heterosexual, to 6, exclusively homosexual, and the following rating of X for those who didn't exhibit any sociosexual contacts or reactions. This spectrum is a good portrayal of the fluidity of sexuality and helped prove that fluid sexualities exist. It also did a lot to acknowledge bisexual people in proving that they do exist. Shocker, I know. Kinsey deconstructed sexuality to a spectrum rather than definite categories. Kinsey's idea didn't stick around much, as other studies regarding sexual identity following Kinsey inevitably made their way back to the binary and essentialist view, but we credit them with this discovery. Another area of deconstruction in queer theory occurs when studying lesbianism. When looking at the identity of lesbian through queer theory, it becomes more than just a sexual orientation. Being a lesbian becomes a symbol for rejecting heteronormativity and the patriarchy. Being a lesbian challenges the ideas that there needs to be a man in a relationship and that women are biologically the more submissive people in a relationship and need to serve men. Being a lesbian is part of a larger discourse, and queer theorists such as Monique Wittig look at the ways in which women have identified as lesbians in the past, not because they were attracted to women, but because they were purposefully rejecting the heteronormative ideals that they had been raised with. In a way, some theorists see being a lesbian as the ultimate form of liberation for women, and even challenges the idea of women itself.
Performativity is the idea that people act in a correct way that corresponds with their assigned gender. This theory was developed by one of the main founders of queer theory, Judith Butler. She says, "When we say gender is performed, we usually mean that we've taken on a role or we're acting in some way, that our acting or our role playing is crucial to the gender that we are and the gender that we present to the world." This doesn't mean that everyone is an actor performing their role as woman or man, but instead they behave in a way they are expected to in accordance to gender norms. When a woman puts on makeup and wears a dress, she is performing as a woman. When a man wears a suit and a tie, he is performing as a man. Gender norms change over time. In today's Western society, wearing a dress is seen as feminine, while in the early 1900s, Roosevelt was captured wearing dresses as a child, but at that time it was a gender-neutral piece of clothing. Similarly, women wearing pants in the early 1900s was forbidden. Pants were seen as masculine, and as a form of protest, mannish women began to wear pants as a form of rebellion. These examples of how gender norms have changed over time is evidence that gender is performative. It is what you do, not who you are. A great example of performativity is drag performance. Drag is seen as the exaggeration and reproduction of gender. Queer theory makes the argument that a drag queen is performing female in the same way that a cisgendered woman is. Drag challenges the definition of what a woman and a man actually are. Another important aspect of performativity is social control. This is a theory developed by Michel Foucault that says there is a panopticon, a prison where guards are able to view anyone's actions at a given time. Since the prisoners have no idea when they will be observed, they begin to control their behavior themselves and develop an omniscient voice in their head that represents society. This voice tells them what is considered normal and reinforces gender norms. Because of this omniscient I, we have a set of expected behaviors and thoughts that are ingrained in us, and we are expected to play our part. Applications of this include the marketing and branding of toys for a certain gender. For example, dolls, dress-up, and makeup are for girls, and cars and video games are for boys. Girls are pushed toward toys that develop their empathy, while boys are directed towards toys that strengthen their spatial awareness and problem-solving.
One of the main focuses of queer theory is also based on rejecting heteronormative ideals and the idea that heterosexuality is quote-unquote natural. Queer theory looks at the way in which such claims have been used in the past to hold power and authority and as a way of othering people that do not fall within these standards. Heterosexuality is portrayed as the norm, and it is something that is not questioned and it is just assumed. From a young age, young children are shown in television and media that the highest form of love exists between a prince and a princess, a man and a woman. While representation is starting to slowly improve, queer characters in media tend to be used as a form of joke. They are shown as a villain, and they are usually killed. There is reason why heterosexual individuals do not have to, quote-unquote, come out. Why they did not have to fight for the right to marry those of the opposite gender, and why they do not experience the same discriminations that queer individuals experience. And that is because society has privileged and labeled them as a natural and othered anyone that does not fit into these standards. Queer theory counters these arguments funded in essentialism, the idea that a person's identity or way of being is based on biology, by deconstructing the term and creating a distinction between procreation and sexual orientations and heteronormative relationships. While procreation is something that has occurred repeatedly throughout history, the heterosexual relationship as we know it today has not. Queer theory deconstructs and takes apart heteronormative and embraces relationships that fall away from these norms and ideals, whether they are between two people of the same gender, polyamorous, asexual, agender, and even relationships that challenge the norm with kinks. The study of queer theory is complex and multi-layered. It challenges forms of thinking and works to deconstruct and challenge the ideas and ways in which we have been taught to see the world. This video has shown just a fraction of what queer theory has to teach and its resistance towards the imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist, heteronormative, ableist, theistic patriarchy.